Greetings, Year 12. It's time to have a look at how one might finesse one's magazine covers and make it more professional. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at these 4 areas that are the common areas that students tend to fall foul of. Normally, their cell lines are way too long, so we're going to have a look at the language of cell lines. We're going to have a look at the use of colour and font. We touched on it last time, but I want you to show you that there are tools definitely out there for you to use and at least get you an idea of how one might approach colour. And then we're going to look at the process of making a house style that is consistent, which is a simple rule: make the first one first and make that a template, and then the second one can be a variation of the first one. But I'm going to show you little changes you might have to go and make, but keeping the same house style. And then a little bit of looking at symmetry and space, going on from our lessons that we've had just previously, where we can look at little finesse little things in terms of just looking for movement on a pixel by pixel basis that can sometimes make all the difference. So let's start with looking at cell lines. There are some devices that we can really call upon very frequently in the use of cell lines across the whole magazine industry, and there are some that are a bit more specific to current affairs magazines. You'll never go wrong in magazine layouts by having some alliteration in your cell lines. That is to say, like the use of the same first letter of a word, right? And Alex always acts accordingly, with a load of A's on them, but that's not a very good cell line, but it is a good example of alliteration. Enigma raising is something that cell lines very often do to tease the audience. So you're teasing them with information and leaving a gap in their knowledge. Sometimes they just actually leave the question mark on the end of it. But alliteration creates excitement about something, and enigmas position the audience to want to read on. Repetition can sometimes be used, so a repeated word or phrase, again creating some more excitement about what's going on in the magazine book itself. Sometimes they use slang, but one thing I would say to you guys is, dependent on your target audience, use Lexis, but use terms that are going to make sense to your audience. Now, your audiences tend to be aimed at sort of the 18 to 25 kind of range, but with some variations in terms of the interest of the magazine. So historically it's been fashion magazines, this year it's current affairs magazines. I suspect they won't be using slang quite so much. And they also like to use straight up how cell lines. So a how cell line might be something like how Facebook lost the truth war, or something like that, and it's some sort of expose or information that is being promised to the audience about the inner workings of Facebook. So that's always going to be valued in current affairs magazines, but they use it elsewhere sometimes as well, more like how to get the new fresh summer look. Exactly, they use that in like fashion magazines and stuff, but just a promise of straight up information. So enigma's like a minus, like, ooh, there's a deficit, whereas the how cell lines just say there will be this inside. As a rule, they're less than 6 words as well, short and sharp and snappy and punchy, with fewer syllables in the words. You're not going to have, I don't know, supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Just seeing if anyone's paying attention. So really, those kind of really long words you don't really want to have. Even though you'll have a higher level Lexis, even though you've got a higher level of Lexis, they will try and keep it quite direct. Now, with current affairs magazines, they do like the active use of questions and question marks at points. You'll see that in things like The Spectator and The Economist, and they will have a more formal Lexis, so you'll have less of the slang that you might see elsewhere, but they might use terms that are a certain sort of nomenclature that particularly educated audience will know, right? A good example of this might be something like some kind of acronym. I remember seeing in The Economist, it literally just had the CDC, which was the Center for Disease Control in America, and I had to look that one up. Also things like E3, which is the Electronic Entertainment Expo, which is where they normally sort of release all the new consoles and games, and people get the first look of those, and that's a really big deal. But people in those circles, in those educated healthcare circles, or those sort of gaming and electronics circles, they'll know what those acronyms mean, and that's going to be true of your educated audience. They're going to be able to see those at a glance and be like, oh yeah, talking about that. All right. So even though you want to keep your lexis formal and you want to have some sort of higher caliber words, when it comes to that use of acronyms, don't be shy, because there is an expectation of knowledge that is addressing your audience's understanding, and that is good actually for your marks, to show that you know that when you're doing your own magazine covers. So let's have a look at how we might put these stories into very exciting prose in our cell lines. I've taken the liberty of making three things that are true or not true, and it's for you to work out what is true. Alright, the first one's not true. But apparently Vera Wang is 71 years old, and she looks amazing for 71. And so I thought I would perhaps talk about her suicide, because she seems like the person least likely to be suicidal. Now, you will approach your stories with the mindset like, I've got a story about, I don't know, a fashion designer suicide, or I've got a story about the PlayStation 5 launch. Of course, it's not really about the PlayStation 5, it's more about Sony and their role in the marketplace in a current affairs magazine. You might also have the story that we've had over the month of June about the advertising backlash against Facebook, because Facebook doesn't seem to want to act particularly quickly on hate speech on its platform in a way that others have led on, such as Twitter. So here is how we go and write cell lines about them on front covers. Look how short they are, and look at the devices that they use. So, the day Vera died. Oh, that's Vera Wang they're talking about. Okay, fine. Yeah. So the idea is that the day Vera died, it's promising straight up information. Vera Wang, her last days. Okay, sounds dramatic. Again, short, addresses the topic, and promises information. Or the last days of Vera Wang. Again, dramatic, same kind of thing, but a promise of information. What you have for PlayStation is something different. It can be as simple as something enigmatic, like the PlayStation returns, and then the audience are thinking about how or where or when is this going to happen, raising the enigma and then positioning them to want to go and read on for information and answers in the book. PS5 but no E3, how Sony launched during lockdown. Okay, so we've got our acronyms in there that we were talking about that the audience would understand because they're educated, but there's certainly a conflict between the PS5 but no E3, that there's a product but no place for it to launch. But then there's the promise of information, how Sony launched during lockdown. Yeah, they're going to give some sort of insight in the book as to the strategy that they used for their product that was particularly innovational because of the the social distancing issues and the lockdown that we had. With Facebook, we know that the advertisers have left Facebook in droves, at least for a while, and we want to create some drama. So, like, when advertisers attack, will Facebook recover? Question mark. Now, there's two things going on there. First of all, you've got a bit of alliteration with advertisers attack, and then the raising of enigma. Will Facebook recover? Question mark. You're allowed straight up question marks in the current affairs magazines. Or it can be just a bit more teasing. So, Facebook faces facts. And that would maybe be more of a secondary cell line. You might want to put more if it was just the main cell line. But there you have some alliteration of the use of the F, but also the enigma is raised. Why are they facing facts? What's gone on with Facebook? And there's also a bit of a pun there with Facebook and faces and facts as well, also having the C there. So there's quite a repetition there as well. So there's this range of devices you can use to create a story you have about something and making it sing on the page. That is to say, really appeal at a glance and create a sort of sense of drama and enigma that the audience will want to part with their cash for by buying the magazine. One of the things all magazine layouts often think about is the balance of colours in the composition. And for this you can use a colour calculator, and they're easily available online, and here's one such example. What I've done is I've got part of the blue colour from the main image of my handsome young black man looking skyward, and you can type in that colour, or you can find the hexadecimal. When I say the hexadecimal, I think we talked about that before. You can see this one has the hashtag 47F3FF, and that is universally that sort of teal blue colour. And then you can ask the colour calculator to look elsewhere on the colour wheel, for example, to give you some sort of complementary colour, as we've done there. So we have that particular sort of big, bright, kind of pinky red, but still quite fierce in, you know, hashtag FF5347. Know your hexadecimal codes. Now, that can be a good place to start. In fact, we may well start with that for our magazine cover, with all of our cell lines, and maybe a tertiary colour. White and black are good, right? White, black, maybe two colours, if that makes sense, is a good look. But other times we might change it to be themed, to do something with the main cell line, for example, because then there's going to be a real theme for that issue. Right, so in order to talk about the importance of colour and font, we're going to start messing with our template we started making in our last video lesson. So with this, you can see we've used a colour picker to go and get that deep red from her buttons, really from the buttons on the trim of her shirt. But at the moment, to be honest, me and you both know that this is looking a bit like a fashion magazine. Even if we go and get rid of our masthead template thingy and put in our new top kit masthead and make sure we get rid of the strapline, or we at least could move the strapline out of the way, then we're going to make some room for that there. And with that, and with the cell lines, it is all looking a bit fashiony, right? And even if we just have those cell lines just off her shoulder, that's fine, as long as you don't mess with the face. That's the most important thing. So we're starting to look like we're going to have something that's looking a bit fashiony because of that kind of limited colour palette that's normally linked to the clothing that's in a fashion magazine. For the purposes of this lesson, we're going to have a look at making it look a bit harder like a current affairs magazine. Right, so let's go and make this look serious. And I think the most important thing we can do first of all is have a serious looking image that's going to help define our colour palette as well. So let's go and get rid of, as we look in the bottom right hand corner at our layers, we're going to get rid of our main cover image, which is our young model girl there, and that's left a little bit of a white bar there as well. And I've brought in this young serious looking man, and then suddenly that's going to go and change the tone of it straight away. So photography is super important. Now we also need to go up and have a look at changing our masthead, and as we've got here, we've got the kind of playful sort of typewritten look to the top kit that we made from the last lesson, and that won't do at all. Plus it's right over his head, and that's not going to be appropriate because you need to be in control of your layers. Let's get rid of that, and then we're going to look for our cell lines and our main cell line, and we're going to start to move those around. So if I go down here to main cell line, you've got main cell line subline underneath. I'm just going to hold shift on that one there, and that's going to move both of those at the same time. And I know whatever happens, whatever the cell line is going to be, I need to move that really off where his chain's going to be. I need to go and give that room to breathe. All right, so I'm going to move that down. We have to have a look at getting those cell lines down. So let's push those down. We've got our move tool. Oh, we're on the wrong layer there. Main cell line there. Let's go for cell line, cell line, cell line, and just drag those down. Again, we want to get those off of his face, but we might find space for them elsewhere. Okay. Let's put those there for now, sitting there in his neck. We can move them around a little bit later. We've got the strap line that's confirming the meaning of the masthead, and with that we can actually, let's change the language of those now, because we know that the language is going to be super important in order to sort of help sell the magazine. At this point I will take the liberty of showing you the new masthead and the new strapline to go with this. So let me go and get top kit, that's gone. Strapline confirming masthead, that's gone. I went and made myself a new current affairs magazine masthead. I've called it MH, the Serious Times, and we're just going to call it Serious. Right, now, that being there, that's all right. That's across his forehead. That could go behind his forehead, but it's not messing with his eyebrows. That's really important. Sometimes if you see magazines, they do sometimes allow some space on the head. All right, that'll do us well. And then we'll have the strapline for times like these. Now, at the moment, that is going to be messing with his eyebrows, so that won't do. But what is true about that strapline is that it's in the same font. Now, the fonts that I'm using in this publication are currently, if we go and have a look, a font that I got in for Serious, because we need to have the brand be unique in some way, so you can't use those standard fonts that are just sitting there in Fontbook or on your Windows system. So with that one there, I used one called Azonix, and that's got that kind of sharp sans serif kind of look with those kind of rounded edges, have that kind of connotations of modernity and sort of sharpness and almost science fiction, like real modern nowness. And the same is true there for the strapline. So far we haven't changed the ones here for the top banner or the splash. We may or may not have the splash every time. What we do need to know is that we're going to have a certain amount of cell lines on there because the board are saying we should. So I'm going to go through now and quickly change all of the cell lines and main cell lines to my other font, which is Tunga. There, Tunga Regular and Tunga Bold. I will have two fonts. You should have two fonts. A branded font and a functional font that you can use for all your body text and perhaps your headlines as well, but something that's got a really strong, consistent look. Right, slight change of plan. For some reason, my functional font has gone missing, but we found another functional font. All right, so we still have our Serious font up at the top there, and we can check that we have that one there by going to the very top, and you can see that it is called Azonix there in the top left hand corner. And if we go down to our cell lines, let's have a look at enigmatic cell line 2, which will be probably this one here, then that one is now Thornbury. All right, I wanted to have something that was sans serif. That seems to be where the sort of, those connotations of modernity are going. You can use serifed ones, but I just got a feeling that for you guys and your younger target audience, they appreciate something that's got a bit more modern as opposed to traditional connotations. And also one of the things I was doing as well was having a little bit of a movement of the cell lines, because as they change, all fonts are different and they have like different line spacings and whatnot, and so we changed the sizes to make them ever so slightly smaller. But you can start to see now it's starting to look a little bit more ordered already. Now what we also need to go and do is move the splash in the top right hand corner, because I don't think splashes are a very big deal in the magazines for the current affairs genre. I think you want to have a nice tight look and make it look a little bit less trashy. Right, so now we've got our colours there. We've got some horrible yellows at the top, and we've got our dark red there that we had from an overhang from our model's buttons. Now what we need to do is think about colour palette. So let's go and have a chat about colour palette, and then we're going to come back and have a look at how that affects this composition. So I've gone to the trouble of going through and getting that complementary sort of hot red colour as best as I could, and put that in opposite that mainly blue teal colour that we sort of colour picked from and put into the colour calculator. Now that does not mean that you are beholden to this at all, but as I think you'll agree, it's looking a bit more banging, it's looking a bit more serious, but it's looking a bit more modern by having that kind of modern design convention to it, and the energy created by the light blue and the sort of oppositional sort of red pink. Now what we need to do first of all now is I think we need to go and get some cell lines into it. Go with a feeling about where you want your colours to go, get your cell lines in it, and then think about what do we have in terms of a theme here, right? I'm going to go and do something with this very handsome, inspirational looking black man, and I think I might do something BLM on it, because me and you and everyone else that's 18 to 25 and highly educated know, well, actually you don't have to be that highly educated, but certainly condensing it for a younger audience to BLM, for Black Lives Matter, is something that young people do in a way that old people don't understand, right? So I would think I'm going to do something for this guy, and we'll put some other cell lines on there, maybe the ones that I was talking about in my example before, and then suddenly this is going to look a lot more current affairs-y. Suddenly, with us putting in the language of those cell lines and using those devices, it is looking a lot more serious and a lot more professional. One of the things I did notice as I went round, I had to make sure that I got my little June 2020 in white there in the bottom right hand corner. Those functional elements need to be done well. But also I was colouring up the cell lines in the banner at the top, and I got rid of the splash, the ear in the top right hand corner. You don't find them being very common in current affairs magazines, but suddenly I had a bit of a gap there, so I moved the two cell lines that were there and I moved them across to make them more symmetrical, so they're not waiting for the third one that's no longer there. And we have our cell lines on the left hand side, with our serious use of prose like the last days of Vera Wang and Facebook faces facts. Now at this stage here in the video, I might add that it looks though the pink might be dying out a little bit on the blue, but that's only because of the amount of pixels that it can display. If we zoom in, we can use our curly whirly or Apple, also known as Command plus, and we can zoom in to our text. Now let's really get in there and see what we've got, and we can see that our pinky red colour is working fine. It's not dying out. It looks like it's dying out from a distance, but when you get in close, maybe when it's at its thinnest there on the left hand side, that will be fine, right? So sometimes it's worth having a look at it a little bit more closely. Now we've used a complementary colour there, but we could use something that maybe is a little bit more serious, perhaps, because it is serious for times like these. So we have an option here. We could leave it as pink and we could start to work on our symmetries, maybe moving the strapline off his eyebrows slightly. We need to go and do that, but I'll talk to you about symmetries later in the video. But what I could do is think about having something a bit more white and black in there, because we are talking about Black Lives Matter. We're also talking about Black Britishness. That's where that article's going to go. So you might have something that's a bit more sort of red in the blue, but in fairness, that kind of acidy red colours working with the acidy blue to be almost a modern connotations of Britishness. So there's room there for us to go and get some white and black in there. So I might do a version of that now just to show you how that might look, and to think very carefully about the use of white and black against colour. So we've gone white. One might say that this has more serious connotations with that kind of more limited colour palette. Now we could have gone black on some bits. We could have gone on the left hand side cell lines. We could even have done the masthead as well, but that would have fought with the colour of his hair. So you're always thinking about colours and how they are merging with other colours and how you don't want that. So I think white would be the look for the suitably serious edition of Serious magazine that we have here. Now let us move on to a little bit of layout. So it's all looking pretty good, and we've got a bit of symmetry there with our cell lines at the top, and it's looking all right there on the left. We might move them down slightly. Think about what's going on in terms of little tiny movements using the cursor keys, right? At the moment, my concerns are that the strap line for times like these is a little bit too much over his eyebrows, which are a feature of how he's kind of looking somewhat inspired and heroic in the image. And also in the main cell line, it looks like that better future is a bit too close to that barcode. It's sort of fighting with it. It's sort of being drawn into the attention of the main cell line, so that's no good. Let's go and move these. Go and find the layers. So let's go to, there we are, 4 times like these, because when you have a text layer, of course, it will give the wording of the text in the text layer. Let's click on that, and we're going to go to the move tool in the top left hand corner, and I'm literally going to tap it up with my cursor keys until I get some kind of symmetry that I'm looking for. And the gaps really are very small in terms of pixels. Let me just zoom in using my Command plus. Let's have a look and see what we're looking at here. Let's get in and have a look. There we go. And so we're looking at, when you're looking at symmetries, the minimum distance between letters. So if we have a look at the distance between, say, the O and the U there, is that matched maybe between the U and the S and the U and the L perhaps? It might be like slightly thinner perhaps, but bear these gaps and spaces in mind. Like, that's really rather important, all right, because that means you can set something else up that looks as though it fits and should be there. If we go down here to the better future masthead, that masthead is sitting a little bit too close to the barcode. Now we could move the barcode, but what we want to do is get into a position where ideally between front covers 1 and 2 certain things stay in the same place. I would argue that you want to have your masthead and your strapline staying exactly the same place. These cell lines here, they're going to want to move depending on what's going on with your image, and then this main cell line is going to move depending on wherever the canvas is of your main image. So I think we're going to move it away from the barcode and just pop that up. So we're on the better future layer, and just going to pop that up by a few pixels just there. So what we want to do is we want to use the dark blue of his top to help us. That's going to be our canvas, and then even though you've got the thread there of it there as well, but that's still fine. And then when we get our what next for BLM, I think we need to have that so that it is in some way symmetrical or in some way sort of meaningfully placed. Now that can really vary depending on the publication, but let's just keep moving that across to the right. But I think we want to have something that's going to give it some level of symmetry as we look through, and some space as well. So you're thinking about maybe the space between the T and the E and the E and the R, and we're going to pop it up so that it looks like it's really meaningfully meant to be there. So let's have a look at maybe the distance between that L and that U there. Is that approximate to something like that E and that R? And that looks about right. And then we know that we've got our letters about symmetrical in the middle. Now let's zoom out. Sometimes you make a small adjustment with your cursor keys and you need to zoom out to sort of see where it fits. So you go Command minus and have a look, and suddenly that's looking just a little bit more balanced, and that's what you're looking for, a balanced composition. In fact, one thing that does strike me there is we have a lack of balance between the A and the distance to the page edge and the question mark and the page edge. Now that's really important. Those things are really important. At the moment it's all lurching to the right, but at the same time we are happy with where what next for BLM, that kind of subline is. So let's go and get a better future. In fact, let's get both of them. We're going to hold shift and click on the layer beneath it, right? So we click on a layer. Let's do that again one more time. Click on a layer, hold shift, click on the next layer, and then those two are linked for the purposes of movement. And then we can just keep tapping across and move the whole thing to the right. And we're looking for that symmetry between the bottom left edge of the A and the top right hook of the question mark, and that's going to give us a real sense of symmetry going forward. These are the little movements you want to be doing just towards the end. So we've moved for times like these up, right? And it might be that with the first one that you have, you can really set your house style. I'm not quite happy where that sits for my first image. I've got a couple of options here. I can either go and get this strap line and make it slightly smaller, but then it's going to have to be the same relative size on my second magazine cover. Or I can put it behind his head, because we can do a thing where we can cut round our guy and layer him forward in front of the masthead and in front of the strap line. But that's okay, because that's a very often used design technique, especially where the audience are familiar with the brand. So right now, because I'm launching my magazine, I might just go and get my for times like these, and I'm going to make that text slightly smaller because I really want to see the masthead, especially for this sort of first edition, really pop at the front of the frame. So I'm going to go and pop that down to 14. Yeah, that's fine. Strap lines are small. They really are. If they're there at all, they are small. But now you'll see that by changing the font size, that's really put it out of whack. So I'm going to have to go and get that one. I like how far it is from the OUS above it. So if I go and click on that layer, click on the move tool, make sure they're in position, and then I'll use my right cursor key to put it back in whack in some way. And it's just off his eyebrow now, just enough. And I'm going to be looking to get the end of my E on these and the end of my S on the big Sirius and line them up. And for that, I will use Command plus, and I will zoom in as well. Let's have a little look as we go. And sometimes even it's worth getting something like a marquee tool and just making a little block and just grabbing up an area and saying, oh, how close to these two sit. So at the moment, if I get to the end of the S there, then the E's a little bit further back. Alright, so maybe that's 1 or 2 pixels of the strapline I need to get. So I need to do a 0-point click. So if I go to my marquee tool, just to be sure, click once so that it's not clicking on anything with a marquee, and selecting that, go back to the move tool, go back to my strapline 4 times like these, and I'm just going to go and bump it with my right cursor key twice, and I think we might be done. I know, I'm going to do one more thing. Let's go and get our banner headlines there. We've got enigmatic cell line there, and how Brexit made money. For some reason it hasn't given us the text of that one, but we're going to hold shift on both of them because we know that's that one there at the top left hand corner, that one there at the top right, and we can bump those down. I think maybe they're just a little bit too much towards the edge of the top of the page. Normally when you have a magazine cover, in fact any printed document, they have what's known as a bleed. So you have a very thin area, a border around the edge that you never cross, and you want to always be sitting slightly inside the bleed, right? So let's go and have a look at getting those two and just bumping both of them down just a little piece. That's probably about half a dozen pixels. And then suddenly, if I zoom out with my Command minus, what do we have? Let's go and make sure we can see the whole composition here. There we go. Maybe we'll put Science CV a little bit closer back. Yeah, the Science of CV 19. Let's go and pop that back a bit. So we'll just click on that layer, and then we're going to. Oh, I've made it invisible. There we go. And we're back. There we go. So we're moving that one back, and we're just looking for little symmetries. How far is the 19 from the edge on the right hand side from the how on the left hand side? I think I should bring it in a little piece more. 2. Yeah, we're done. Okay, so I think we've done quite a lot of work today, but hopefully you'll see how you can turn something that's just a template into something a lot more meaningful and mark grabbing, especially in terms of those fine details that really give you that professional edge of making a current affairs magazine.